Ever feel like no matter how much money you have, it's never quite enough? And yet you have the sense that everyone else around you seems to be doing much better. And that's not helped by the fact that whereas 20 years ago we'd be comparing ourselves to our immediate neighbours, friends and family, today, thanks to social media, we're basically comparing ourselves to everyone else on the planet. Now we're just bombarded every single day with images of seemingly ordinary people just like us, flashing the cash and loving it. Holidays every school break, eye-wateringly expensive house renovations, 2 cars in the driveway and a new outfit every single day, seemingly endless disposable cash. If you feel like you've fallen behind in your personal finances, I am going to show you some data and insights that will shock you and make you realise that actually you're much richer than you think. Stick with me right to the end because I'm going to share with you the #1 thing that made me feel better when it comes to how I'm doing financially. First of all, a bit of a reality check. There is a huge difference between someone who spends a lot of money to make themselves appear rich and actually being wealthy. When we attach the wealthy label to certain people online, it's normally more to do with what we perceive of them than it being based on any facts. People don't stick their monthly income and outgoings in their public bio. As it says in The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, wealth is the cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought. Wealth is what you don't see. Now that's not to say that someone we see splashing the cash around isn't wealthy. It doesn't automatically mean that they are. For example, someone who lives in a very modest house in a low-cost area, who owns that property outright and is able to put away a sizable chunk of their income into savings every single month and cover all of the expenses, all of the things that they like to spend their money on, that person has wealth. Someone living in an enormous house, which they bought at the very top end of their borrowing capabilities, may struggle to make ends meet and eventually lose it all. They may be so debt-laden that they cannot afford to spend freely, which means we couldn't describe them as wealthy, but as outsiders, we would perceive them to be rich. There's a misunderstanding that consumption must mean wealth. So the influencer on their 5th getaway of the year with a whole new wardrobe must be wealthy. But that isn't necessarily the case. You have no idea of the actual numbers involved in their lifestyle. This is a problem because a key factor in our own well-being is other people's apparent wealth. A Yale study found that our own perceived wealth and status relative to others affects how happy we are. One researcher said, even if people today are earning higher wages, there is going to be limited impact on their happiness if they are not doing at least as well, if not better, than others. So perception and reality are 2 different things, but they both have an impact on how we are feeling. Let me give you an example. I started researching this video after a discussion I had with a lot of my Instagram followers when I shared a story about Labour's plans to add 20% VAT charges to private school fees. I shared a Financial Times article with parents who send their kids to private school who said that any fee increase will mean that they can't afford it going forward. I had hundreds of replies to this story. Many people were saying, look, if you can afford private school in the first place, you're doing really well. These were people who were saying, look, in my wildest dreams, I could not fit this into my budget, even if I cut back absolutely everything. But I also had a lot of messages from parents with kids in private school who say, look, sending my kids to private school is my only luxury thing, and I scrimp and save over every other thing in my life in order to make it work. And some of them were saying they were still struggling to make ends meet. They certainly would not call themselves wealthy. That article had a case study about a family of 4 where the 2 kids went to private school. The parents earned £210,000 between the 2 of them. The private school fees were 45k a year, and yet they said they were struggling living hand to mouth. Now, a lot of people would see a household that earns 210k a year as being wealthy, and indeed it puts them in the top 5% of earners. But clearly that family doesn't feel wealthy because they're putting everything into the kids' private school fees and presumably as well a mortgage. Now of course, as our income increases, we tend to increase our spending as well. Those on more rarely feel like it's more because we tend to adapt our lifestyle accordingly. And this is known as lifestyle creep or lifestyle inflation. So at what point does it start to feel like enough? In the UK's top 10% of earners, those on £59,200 or more, many of them don't feel rich. What you consider to be wealthy or rich can often really depend on who is around you, your peers, your colleagues, your friends and family. We set the bar around the people immediately around us. So if everyone else around you is on 60k, then you see this as nothing special. And to give you some more context, the top 10% of earners constitute the most unequal group, stretching from those who earn 60 grand at the bottom to the 0.1% whose multi-millions and billions shoot off the graph. Most of these people are almost all much further from the very top than they are to the median. A Harvard study of millionaires asked them how much more money they would need in order to score a perfect 10 when it comes to happiness. And the vast majority of respondents across all wealth levels, whether they had $1 million or $100 million, said that they would need at least 100% to a 1000% increase in their income in order to score that perfect 10 when it comes to happiness. So it turns out that even millionaires don't feel that it's enough. The perception of how much you need to earn in order to be considered wealthy changes depending on how much you earn. So with that in mind, let's look at some reasons why you are richer than you think. Number one, you have £1,000 or more in savings. This is one that I always look at for a reality check when I am playing the comparison game when it comes to winning at life, money and everything. 1/3 of UK adults have less than £1,000 in savings, and 1 in 7 have nothing at all. So if you have £1,000 or more in your bank account, then you're already in the top 2/3 of the adult population. And your age is also worth considering here. The average savings for people aged 35 to 44 is just under £6,000. So if you're in your 20s, the average is much lower than that. Number two, you can cover at least 1 month without earning. There's no rule about how much should be in your emergency fund, but many financial advisors say that there should be enough to cover between 3 and 6 months of essential expenses. Based on data from the ONS, we can work out that the average monthly household bills are around £1,500. So if we look back to those savings figures that showed us that 1/3 of UK adults have less than £1,000 in savings, that means that they wouldn't be able to cover themselves in an emergency for even 1 month of essential household bills, let alone 3 or even 6 months. If you have enough in savings, even just to cover you for 1 month of emergency expenses, then you're doing pretty well. Number three, you're paying into a pension every month. Most employees pay into a pension. However, when you look at self-employed people, it's only 18% that are paying into a pension. 1 in 6 over 55s have no pension savings at all. So if you have anything in a pension, then you're doing well. If you're paying into it every single month, even better. And if you feel like you're not paying enough into your pension, you are not alone, join the club. Data suggests that a single householder will need just over £37,000 in order to live a comfortable retirement. But very few people are saving enough to hit that kind of level. And a YouGov poll showed that only 1/4 of people felt that they were saving enough into their pension. Number four, you have a plan for when the plan fails. Just having a plan can be half the battle when it comes to your financial future. However, also having a plan for when that plan goes wrong takes it to the next level. Life is full of uncertainties, and our investments, our job situation are no different. So if you're assuming a 10% return on your investments, it's a good idea to plan so that you'd be okay if you only end up with 5% return. If you're in a well-paid job, have a plan for what happens if the company goes bust overnight. And having a plan doesn't mean that you have a rigid budget set every month. It can just be a look at the bigger picture. That may be a career plan to move up the ladder in your current company, or a job move to another company that pays better, or maybe some investment in your own self-improvement so that you can move into a better career with better prospects for yourself. Or it could be setting a long-term plan for your finances and retirement that's achievable. And fifth and finally, the number one thing that made me feel better is accepting that what I have is enough. Studies show that people continually shift the goalposts of what they need to be happy as they move up the salary brackets. So if we are always chasing the next bump in pay, the chances of us ever being satisfied are pretty slim. So I think you feel richer when you come to accept that what you have right now is actually enough. If you're able to cover your bills every month, save a little for a rainy day, and putting some money away in your pension, you're doing pretty well. And it sounds cheesy, but I truly believe that true riches lie in the people that we have in our lives. And on that note, I'll leave you with this quote from author Jonathan Swift: "A wise person has money in their head, but not in their heart." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more from me.